To our panelists, thank you very much for setting the scene. We now have a bit of context in terms of some of the strategic challenges facing the different sectors in this region of South Africa. Challenges in the traditional leadership governance model, challenges in terms of the needs of the business community, challenges also been articulated in terms of the approach to integrated developmental planning. And we've also heard from Mr. Lani what interventions can be pursued, particularly when one looks at the university city concept as a catalyst for economic growth and development. I now invite our panelists to prepare for what promises to be a robust, insightful, and solution-oriented discussion as we interrogate one of the most important questions facing our nation. How do we close the National Development Plan Vision 2030 strategy execution gap and transform strategy into measurable impact? That's what I'm hearing from our panelists to say, how do we move from theory to action? Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin today's discussion, allow me to set the scene. There comes a time in the life of every nation when it must pause, reflect, and honestly ask itself whether its ambitious or other ambitions are being matched by its actions. South Africa finds itself at precisely such a moment. As we move closer to 2030, we are called upon not only to celebrate our progress, but to confront the realities that continue to hinder inclusive growth, effective governance, and sustainable development. Again, panelists, I want to thank you for honoring this invitation and for joining us today for what I believe will would ensure that majority of our citizens are aligned with the realities and the challenges that are faced by people in rural South Africa. Today is not merely another conference. It is not another policy discussion. It is not another strategic planning session. It is a moment of reflection, a moment of truth, a moment of accountability, and perhaps, if we are courageous enough, a moment of reimagining the future of our commitments. Today we gather under the theme, Closing the National Development Plan Vision 2030, Strategy Execution Gap. Not because South Africa lacks vision, not because South Africa lacks plans, not because South Africa lacks policies, but because, despite having some of the most comprehensive development frameworks in the world, too many of our people continue to live without dignity that those plans promise. The uncomfortable truth is that our challenge is no longer planning. Our challenge is execution. Our challenge is implementation. Our challenge is turning aspirations into outcomes, turning budgets into service, turning strategies into jobs, turning promises into opportunities, and turning hope into reality. When we look across our country, we see two South Africas. One South Africa is represented by places like Sandton, Waterfall City, Mhlanga, a place of world-class infrastructure, a place of investment, a place of opportunity, a place connected to global markets, a place where economic activity never sleeps. But there is another South Africa, a South Africa represented by many rural towns and villages, a South Africa where young people walk kilometers to access services, where roads remain unpaved, where investment struggles to arrive, where economic opportunities remain limited, where unemployment has become normalized, and where poverty is inherited from one generation to another. The question before us today is simple. How can two communities exist within the same democracy, under the same institution, guided by the same national development plan, yet experience such vastly different realities? That is the strategy execution gap we are talking about. The greatest threat facing our communities today is not lack of ideas, it is unemployment, because unemployment is not merely an economic statistic. Unemployment today is sitting at 32%. It is a social crisis. It is a governance crisis. It is a developmental crisis. And ultimately, it becomes a dignity crisis. When a young graduate remains unemployed for years, we do not merely lose a worker. We lose confidence. We lose hope. We lose innovation. We lose future entrepreneurs. We lose future taxpayers. We lose future community leaders. And when millions experience this reality simultaneously, society begins to weaken. Unemployment breeds dependency. Dependency breeds frustration. Frustration breeds instability. And instability undermines development. That is why job creation cannot remain a chapter in a strategy document like National Development Plan. It must become the organizing principle of local development. The second challenge our panelists referred to earlier on has to do with inequality. South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world, not because opportunity does not exist, but because opportunity is unevenly distributed. Where you are born often determines the quality of education you receive, the infrastructure available to you, the networks you can access, the healthcare you receive, and ultimately the opportunities available to your family. The gap between rural and urban South Africa is not simply a geographical divide. It is increasingly becoming an opportunity divide, a developmental divide. If left unresolved, it becomes a generational divide. The National Development Plan envisioned a South Africa where all citizens would participate meaningfully in the economy. Yet, for many communities, that vision still feels distant. Not because the vision is flawed, but because the mechanisms of execution remain weak. And my panelists, most of them have alluded to that point. The third and the most important one, two of my panelists refer to challenges around infrastructure. Infrastructure is not merely concrete and steel. Infrastructure is opportunity. Infrastructure is mobility. Infrastructure is economic participation. Infrastructure is dignity. A road connects a farmer to a market. A bridge connects a child to school. Reliable electricity connects entrepreneurs to consumers. Digital infrastructure connects rural communities to global opportunities. Without infrastructure, development remains theoretical. Without infrastructure, investment remains hesitant. Without infrastructure, communities remain excluded. Infrastructure is therefore not a technical issue. It is a strategic issue. It is a governance issue. And ultimately, it is a human development issue. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to introduce a thought that may challenge conventional thinking, a thought that deserves serious reflection. Throughout our history, traditional leaders have been the custodians of land. I personally do not like using the word traditional leaders. These are royal years. They are members of royal families. They've been custodians of land, custodians of culture, custodians of identity, custodians of community cohesion. Yet in many parts of South Africa, they've become something more. Whether formally recognized or not, many traditional authorities are already performing functions associated with local governance. The immediate disputes, the function of Department of Justice. They facilitate community development, the function of economic development. They coordinate local strategic initiatives, the function of national government. They engage investors, the function of trade and investment entities of government. They manage land allocation, the function of Department of Housing. They respond to a lot of community needs, and in many instances, they are already performing elements of town management without the formal mandate, without the resources, without the support or budget required to do so effectively. In some instances, you have traditional authorities being responsible for more than 100 villages, population exceeding around 300,000 with no infrastructure and budget. The question therefore becomes, how do we fully explore the developmental potential of traditional governance within our modern democratic framework? This is not an argument against municipalities. It is an argument against constitutional governance. It is an invitation to explore whether there's a more effective partnership model between traditional institutions and local government, a model that recognizes the reality on the ground, a model that empowers local leadership, a model that accelerates development, a model that brings decision-making closer to communities. The objective must never be about power. The objective must never be about transactions. The objective must always be development. Ladies and gentlemen, history teaches us that nations rise when leadership rises. Communities prosper when vision is matched by execution. And societies transform when ordinary people refuse to accept the status quo. We heard Dr. Martin Luther King, who once spoke of a dream. Our own Nelson Mandela spoke of a dream. But today, South Africa does not need another dream. We have a Vision 2030. The question, therefore, before us is whether we possess the courage, discipline, and collective will to execute it. Whether we are willing to move beyond reports into action, beyond conferences into implementation, beyond promises and into delivery. Because future generations will not judge us by the strategies we wrote. They will judge us by the communities we built. They will judge us by the opportunities we created. They will judge us by whether a child born in rural Guyana, whether a child born in rural Malomale, whether a child born in rural Maine had the same chance to succeed as a child born in Sandton, as a child born in Bryanston, as a child born in Bedfordshire. This is the true measure of development. As we commence today's dialogue, I encourage our panelists to engage openly, challenge assumptions, share your experiences, offer solutions, and think boldly. Because the future for communities will not be determined by government alone, nor by traditional leaders alone, nor by business alone, nor by universities alone. It will be determined by our collective ability to align around the common purpose and execute relentlessly. The gap between where we are and where we aspire to be is not inevitable. It can be closed. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce the first day for the day. In our theme, we look at the role of traditional leadership. And I'm going to ask Majesty to lead this discussion in terms of the role of traditional leadership, particularly the issue of the mandate that they've been given by government without any resources.
Thank you very much again, Mangani. The issue you have introduced is something that is very much close to my heart. Because when I was General Secretary of Controlesa, we were dealing with this issue, especially before the first local government elections of 2000. I remember when Sidi Mufamadi was minister then, it came to a situation where the date of the elections have been postponed 3 times because we couldn't agree with government on the role of traditional leadership in the communities. It is indeed very, very important to ensure that as traditional leaders, we need to be brought together, we need to come together with government, from local government, provincial government, national government, to talk about what development how it has to happen within our areas. Legislation has to change. If you see the Constitution, chapter 12, when it talks about traditional leadership, it talks about recognition of traditional leadership, but it doesn't give effect as to how it has to operate. You know, if you look at local government, there is a chapter on the local government, and they come down to legislation to stipulate how the municipalities must function, but none of that exists within the traditional institution. So it created a serious problem. We were, as traditional leaders, requested to participate in local municipalities, but without a vote. How do you go and become effective in a municipal setup? You give thoughts, you discuss, you agree, but when decisions have to be taken, your vote doesn't count because you are not a member, you are just an ex-officio member. So most of us decided not to attend such meetings because it's a waste of time. I would rather stay home, give my thoughts to the municipalities, they decide. Remember, municipalities operate wall to wall. In other words, whether you have a farm, your own farm, or your own house, you fall under municipality. But that doesn't mean the municipality owns the land. It doesn't own the land. The land belongs to the people. All this time, we're taken as minors because you actually don't own the land. The land is owned by the state. If you want to develop your area, you get a community resolution. It still has to go to the Minister of Land Affairs or Rural Development to give effect to that development to take place. So there has been difficulties. You come up with projects. You identify a piece of land in your area that you want to develop. It goes to the municipality. The municipality says, no, sell us the land, we'll develop for you. Imagine, there's no way a municipality will have money to do development. The municipality is there to make sure that all the requirements for development should take place. So that's where the issue of corruption comes in. Because if you allocate a piece of land to the municipality, they go and negotiate with the developer, and there's always a kickback. So, unfortunately, with me in my area, I refuse. We cannot give a municipality land to develop. We can develop ourselves. We can identify who the developers are going to be, so that everything must come down to the people. We have to own and do. The tribal land is not for sale. Tribal land must remain with the community. Presently, we don't even have title deeds. So that title deeds is held by the minister. Still, there's no change. During colonial powers, during apartheid, even during now, our own government refuses to give us title deeds. Why? We don't know. There's a lot that is not right. Even if you are given land to develop or a title deed, you are told that you own the surface. You don't own the minerals. The minerals belong to the state. I tend to differ with that aspect. If you're looking at the northwest, the Bafokeng, they were very fortunate in that when they bought the land, initially, the title deed also included the mineral rights. That's why they were able to get the Impala company to partner with them, and they were successful. They are developing, they developed their land. They are even able to put in all the infrastructure. Government will just come in with for instance, the clinic need to be built. They don't go to government to give them money. They have the money to do so. They go to government only to make sure that they pay the nurses and the doctors who come there and provide the medicine. So this is how it has to be. Let the owners, the true owners of the land, be the ones who must lead in the development. Mangani, this panel discussion comes at the right time. On the 30th of May, there was a launch of the centenary of the Kruger National Park. In other words, as you know, the Kruger National Park was proclaimed in 1926. It's 100 years now. So it's going to be a continuous celebration for a whole year until May of next year. And fortunately, some parks in the Kruger National Park have seen it imperative that the 100 years of the existence of the Kruger National Park, that was the centenary of this position. Some of ourselves, the Mhinga and the Maluleke people, were dispossessed of their land for the past 100 years. This cannot continue. We have to make sure that the community benefits. And as you probably know, 80% of the Kruger National Park is in the Limpopo province. There are a lot of opportunities that can happen inside the Kruger National Park in terms of tourism, other infrastructures. So we want to make sure that this time around we are involved not only in executing, but even at the board, the Sun Parks board. We have to be there because it's our land. Fortunately, when the Swiss missionaries came and started going through this country, they produced a map in 1903 called the Sultansberg. If you look at that map, you can see Mhinga written in bold letters. We regard that map as a title deed. In other words, the land belongs to us, even though it has been proclaimed as a national park. So we want to make sure that there is effective collaboration. We have to be involved in whatever happens within there to make sure that our people benefit. So the issue of local government and traditional leadership must be looked differently, because we cannot go on like this way. Municipalities come and say, okay, this when we develop this, we have to be the people with the final say. It can't be that. We need to make sure that the traditional leaders or rural who call ourselves royal leaders, not traditional leaders. We are royal leaders, the true leaders of the people, because we have the land. The land issue is very critical. It cannot be left the way it is. It also brings me to the first, when we look at the Constitution, we have the preamble which says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. It cannot be. That's why today we're seeing a lot of problems with undocumented people. South Africa belongs to bona fide people who were born South Africans and those who are in the country legally. So obviously what is happening now, unfortunately, it's taking a different route. If we can change even the preamble to say the land belongs to bona fide South Africans. In other words, those who are born in South Africa and those who are in the country legally, then we are talking a different story. The issue of border management. You recall, Mangani, that way back when Vali Musa was still the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, there was an event where the fence between South Africa and Mozambique in the Kruger National Park was removed to allow animals to freely roam between South Africa and Mozambique, the so-called Greater Kruger Transfrontier Park, to create such a park. We hear that situation as important, but today, because there is no fence, people talk about porous South Africa. That one, the situation there inside the Kruger is not just porous, there is no fence. Now, if there is no fence, if there is no control, how do you regulate the people who come in and go out? So the issue must be relooked to make sure that we have fences. I mean, when we read the Bible, there was the Jericho wall. Protection is very important to the community. Because what's happening now, people who come in from villages, steal cattle, drive them through the Kruger National Park, poison the animals, the lions and everything, into the neighboring countries. You can't let that happen. So, government, traditional leaders, and people who are involved in such institutions like SANParks have to come together and make sure that we look into all these challenges and come out. I can tell you, in 2030, maybe something better will be in place. Yeah. So in summary, the issue of traditional leadership, participating in local municipalities must be changed to make sure that there's effective communication and decision making as far as rural development is concerned.
Thank you, Ndabezitha.